Computer. So, hello and welcome to week two's HD chats with myself, Jessica Shillingford. I'm a 1-3 projector, splenic projector, and I'm joined by Kelly Myskowski, the founder of Inner Light Transformational Coaching and Craniosacral Therapy. Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you, Jess. And thank you for being brave enough to get through all of that from my last name to the business name. I try to make sure people take some time with it.
It's all good. So today we are going to be exploring the beautiful topic, one of my favorite topics, intuition. And we're going to look at it through an HD lens. We're going to look at it through a scientific lens. We're going to look at it from a multidimensional and spiritual lens, because on one level it can be considered to be a spiritual, it is spiritual information. It's how spiritual information comes through us, but it's not necessarily something that you need to be spiritual to actually use. If we look at con artists, or we look at people who play poker and gambling and certain things like that, it's not that they're spiritual, but they're still accessing intuition, right? So I want us to explore this vast and beautiful topic in multiple different ways. So I want to begin with asking you to introduce to us your thoughts on intuition and what you were sharing on LinkedIn the other day.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I think probably to frame it, the best way to start is to say that what I find is the definition of the word depends on the context in which it's being used. And for me, and growing up, when I heard intuition, I thought it was something that was reserved for select chosen people. And they're usually the people that were very, very different, that stood out in a significant way, that were difficult maybe to relate to. They didn't fit into society well. They were psychics, mediums, those kinds of people. And what I found, over the course of my experience and my lifetime, is that it depends on, again, the context. But to me, it's about receiving intuition from a source of intelligence, a knowledge base that is much greater than the human mind can begin to imagine. That's essentially from source.
Yes.
And we can use it to our benefit, or we can use it, to the detriment of others, like with con artists or someone like that. And we're not teaching people how to do that here. That's not the intention at all. But for me, and my understanding and how I came into doing this work was through having some issues with my body that I was trying to understand. And I came to realize that it was a message from my higher self guiding me. And when I learned to listen to that message, its purpose was served and my body felt better. And so as I dug into this, I realized that this is how we're built.
Yeah.
Our bodies are responding to our thoughts and to our circumstances and our environment. And if we can learn to understand our own unique response system, we can use it to our benefit and be healthier and happier because of it and make better choices. So this is something that was built into our biology. It is science when we come to understand it in this way. And ultimately, it's kind of part of our stress response. But there also, within our anatomy and our biology, are gifts within our senses that sometimes are a little more sensitive in some people than others. And then some of that can become evident in one's human design chart as well, perhaps, which is not something that I've studied in depth, per se, that aspect of it. But there are elements of human design that we can also bring in for our decision-making process, in addition to what I'm talking about. So thank you for asking that.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
So for me, intuition is spiritual information, and it can come to us in multiple ways. So for me, how I've always had claircognizance. I've always had vivid dreams. I've had prophetic dreams. I've always been very aware of the non-physical realm, and the subtle layers and perceptions available to us um, to be guided. And it's only, and I took a lot of drugs, so I numbed out in a lot of ways, and plus there was levels of trauma and stuff like that as well, that somehow sort of blocked my conscious use of it. But after my awakening, I began to deeply connect with my higher self, with angels and guides, with departed loved ones. I'm not a medium, but I get information with them through dreams. I get clairaudience. So we have the different skills. I've got claircognizance. I've got clairaudience where we hear things, where claircognizance is where we know things. So I'll give an example of how I first became aware of that. One example, there's many in my life actually, where I have known something and not known why, and I was completely right. So there was a time where my dad was in hospital. I found him. I knew there was something wrong, went to his house, found him on the floor, took him to the hospital, and they refused to give him an MRI scan. And I was saying and I was like, this is neurological, he needs a scan. And they were like, are you a doctor? And I'm like, no, I just know it is. And they wouldn't give it. They were like, oh, no, 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 no. And then they phoned me at midnight after like 15 hours, and they were like, oh, we're going to give him it is neurological. He had a blood clot. And so that was like, oh, I knew it, but I didn't know how. And I didn't think anything of it. Even like school tests, why I was always really great at exams is because my motto used to be the first answer is always right. Now, some people might say that's the spleen, because the spleen's intuition, but as you said, the spleen is about survival and knowing how, which where to go or which thing to do in the moment to be safe, to survive. It's not necessarily intuition. So this is what I want to say. I want to talk about in human design. Human design is a way of trusting our body as the vehicle to guide us. But at its core, when we teach people about strategy and authority, what we're saying is here is a strong, stellar, like way of decision making and trusting that decision. For me, though, intuition is not that limited. Intuition is vast. So intuition can drop an idea into your mind to take an action to prepare for something without you knowing why. And only when the event comes, then your splenic decision, comes in and you go, oh, so I'll give an example of how that works. Quite a lot for me, I'll get an idea to start preparing a course or to study something, and then later that day I'll get a phone call from someone saying, Jess, can you give me a session on this thing? So my spleen at that point, so I get the invitation, I'm recognized, my spleen at that point makes a decision. But prior to that, which divine intelligence or other subtle energy was able to connect to that, making that right choice in that right moment before the event occurs? Do you see what I'm saying?
Oh, yes. And I thank you for spelling that out. I have a couple of friends that are splenic projectors, and this spleen intrigues me because of how quickly it acts. And ultimately, that is tied to our survival instincts. So a lot of intuition was built in the beginning into humans early on, purely for survival. It was that instinctual knowing and how our body is responding, whether you're getting goosebumps and your hair standing on end, you feel the hair in the back of your neck stand up, those kinds of responses. And then over time, as we've evolved and our lives have evolved, and the dynamics of our lives and the dimension of our lives in the human sense, not in the quantum physics sense, but we need to be aware of more things, and our decisions are more complicated, and our bodies are showing us metaphorically how we're handling our lives. So when we're stressed, it's going to show up in a particular area of our body related to the type of conflict at the root of the stress. And so when our bodies are off, we can look into, what does this area represent for me? What is this holding for me to know, to see that I can improve on in my life? an opportunity to grow. And to me, that is still intuition, in that it's information that's bigger, it's from my soul, it's guiding me to be better, to fulfill my potential in my life. Now, as an emotional projector, from a human design standpoint and decision making standpoint, I will tend to defer to how am I feeling around this choice ultimately, after I've had input perhaps in other ways. And it depends again on what it is. And typically for emotional projectors, we need a longer time frame for the really big decisions to go through our ups and downs, the various aspects of our emotional wave, and come to a point of clarity. For me personally, that clarity is essentially devoid of emotion. There is a knowing.
Right.
And this shows up for me in different ways too, because sometimes when I am speaking truth, my voice will catch. It's like literally nothing will come out. And I'll know it's the right thing.
Yeah.
And so I'll kind of process, well, should I go or should I go or should I not? And kind of just see how it feels. And I've had to get to know myself in that respect in order to know what my ultimate decision-making authority feels like. But then I've had instances of claircognizance. I don't typically hear, I'll say that I heard it because it's a voice in my head that allows me to know.
Right.
So I'm not actually looking around like there's someone in the room talking to me. And that's my concept of what clairaudience is like. Within my human design, my sense of smell is supposed to be really strong. I will say that I am sensitive to some smells that I don't care to be around, with, colognes, perfumes, scented candles, things like that. But I have a sense of that metaphorically may be referred to as a nose for the direction or truth of something, where there is a gap or an issue in something, in a system or in what someone's saying. Or as I'm working with a client, they'll say something and something just kind of clicks within me, like right there. That is where you need to look for your answers. This is wherein your problem lies, your challenge that you're dealing with.
Yeah.
I go for my walks in the morning. I know what time I need to be back. Sometimes I don't have all the time in the world. I've got an appointment and I'll get lost in thought and something will happen. I'll hear a bird, or all of a sudden my legs feel real heavy, or something will happen and I'm like, what's up with that? It's like, oh, I can't take another step. Oh, turn around and I get back at the exact time I need to get back.
Right.
And I've had instances with loved ones and their health. I mean, when my mom was passing from cancer, my sister was trying to decide if she should come home or not. How do we best use the time and time things? How is this going to unfold? And I said, my gut just tells me we've got, X number of days. It was like, I said 2 to 3 weeks or something like that. And it was a day shy of the maximum window when she actually passed. I don't know how I knew that, but it felt right when I said it. I had no sense of her in my life beyond that point. It was a feeling, because it's emotion.
Yes, and I'll give you. Sorry, no, sorry. No, that's a beautiful point about that as well. Like, so I'll give another example of my dad, because my dad, my dad was stabbed really badly when I was 7, and I dreamt that. I woke up in the morning and I was like, hey, I dreamt that my dad was stabbed. And my mum actually was like, yeah, this has actually happened. And it was really bad. Like the guy went in, went up, like missed, like got his diaphragm, like, and went round. So it was like proper crazy. And it was like he got all of his organs, but certain things were just missed, but everything was like really damaged. So I dreamt that. But I'll give another example of, I'd saved my dad's life quite a few times because I just had this knowing that something was wrong, and I'd go around and I'd sort it out. And then the time that he actually died, it was a Friday. So he rang me and he was like, because he used to ring me every morning. as I was walking to school to teach, and he would just ring me, and his last words to me was, "I love you. I'm so proud of you, teacher Jessica. You have a career." And I was like, "Thanks, Dad. I love you too." And the next morning, I didn't hear from him, and I was like, "Oh, that's strange." Sunday morning, that was the Friday. Sunday, didn't hear. Monday, I rang him, no answer, and I'm like, okay, there's something wrong. And my ex-boyfriend rang me at the time. He was also a projector, but we didn't know any of that at that time. And he said, "How are you?" Blah blah blah. And I said, "I think my dad is dead." And he went, "Do you want to go round there?" And I was like, "No, I need to go round at 3 o'clock tomorrow." And it was like, it was Tuesday, it was 3 o'clock, and that's when I had to go. And when I got there, yep, opened the door, his bedroom door was shut, everything was laid out on the table, so his watch, his things. And I had to call a friend because I was like, "Oh my God, I'm not opening the door. My dad's in there and I know he's dead." And he was. So again, it was this like strong knowing. So this is intuition. It's not your spleen or your decision making, but it's subtle information that is coming through you to give you to guide you. But so I just want to so very briefly go through the authorities, and to write them down because I don't always remember everything at the top of my head. So we've got the emotional authority, which Kelly's just spoken about. It's not about having an instant knowing. It's not about instant clarity. So it's about having to wait through your wave to come to your clarity. And for you, it's a deep knowing eventually, right? It comes as a clear knowing. Then we've got the sacral beings with their yes, no response, and it's aha or mm. And another way of experiencing that for them could be having their aura to expanding and feeling like expansive with something, or feeling really contracted. And if a sacral being in your life isn't connected with their body and they're not connected to their sacral response, that's one of the ways that they can begin to probably try and connect with that. Then we have the splenics, and that's me with the spleen, and it's very subtle. And until you really get grounded and really have a practice of being physically in the body, not dissociated, not floating all around, but aware, for me, it comes through in varieties of ways. It's the tremor of truth. So it's a deep shudder in my spine. It's goosebumps. It's oh yeah, sometimes I get like if it's wrong, I get a like that in my like lower sacral. And if it's well, sometimes it can be wrong or right in my solar plexus area. So it's like all these different, they all mean different things, but now I understand it. So it's about getting to know your way of interpreting that decision making thing, authority. So then we've got the ego projectors, and it's about being selfish. So this is your will center. The real question is, do I have the energy to follow through on this? Is it something I really want? And this is interesting because I think for the outer authority of the mental projectors and the self-projected ego projectors, not the self-projected, sorry, the ego projectors, they have to talk things through and hear themselves, but they also need to have information. They need information. They need to weigh up pros and cons. Whereas for me, when I went to psychic ability training, and the way that I was taught, intuition is instant. Like you get that clear knowing, or you get a visual symbol, or you just know that that animal flying past you is a loved one, or, you know, or you should, or that you should just stay in the house and not take that route this morning, you know. So I think they're two distinct skill sets, and they are skills. They're not for the special or for the only the mystics. That's why I think everyone's a mystic. But really, yeah, as you say, intuition is our built-in way of navigating the human experience as spirit, as a high vibrational spiritual consciousness in human form. And that's what I think Ra's talking about when he's talking about the body as the vehicle. What's the passenger? What's meant to be? Is it the mind or the body? But that's what I think he's talking about. It's about bringing in that high vibrational spiritual consciousness and allowing the body to guide it, but using your higher self and that's why I think, actually, I don't think this, This is why it's confusing, because it's like, it's not about spiritual awakening and like your purification process of becoming more loving, becoming more centered, more grounded, more able to see things from a higher perspective, doesn't necessarily mean that you don't access this spiritual information and intuition when you're not in that more enlightened state.
Exactly. And it's, I think you make an interesting point. What I was thinking of and kind of smiling to myself when you were talking about your training is so many of these training programs, coaching programs, and opportunities were developed by people that had these skills and gifts finely honed,
Yeah.
with the assumption that we're all human beings, therefore we all have this ability. And I agree and I disagree at the same time, because it was without any awareness of what is consistent within us, what is conscious within us, what is unconscious, and what is inconsistent. From a human design standpoint, we can map that out
Yeah.
and see there are just so many layers to this, so many things affecting it, between the people that we're around, the environment that we're in, the transits, and how all the planets and sun and moon and everything are moving in relationship to each other, and
Yeah.
how we're being cosmically supported or not, that brings out these abilities even more in us or not. Conditioning, trauma, diet,
Yes.
our overall health, all of these things have an effect on us. And it's, I think probably the biggest button for me is when someone makes a blanket statement,
Mm.
you can do this, everybody can do this. And so something happens to someone where they start to think there's something wrong with them because it's not happening for them.
Yeah.
And I think there's more awareness around this. And I may have mistakenly or out of ignorance of the time done that myself
Yeah.
as well. And now I'm understanding, in theory, we all have everything built in us, but we're here for a reason, and here to experience something for a greater lesson, our greater growth on a spiritual soul level. And it may not be in this particular experience I'm going to have access to that gift
Right.
or skill consistently.
Yes.
And I think the other important thing that kind of goes along with this is that it doesn't mean it's all rainbows and roses. It doesn't mean you won't step in the crap on the way. Maybe your guidance will take you right into the path of chaos and a shit show, because that's what you need to experience.
Mm.
And people could beat themselves up saying, I followed every instinct. I used a pendulum, and I dowsed, and I flipped a coin, and I walked a labyrinth and meditated, and everything said do this. And then, yeah, but there's a silver lining in there. And from the human level, we may not see what the bigger experience is. So,
Mm.
it makes it, for me, it's supportive and helpful knowing that I'm walking the path that I'm here to walk the best that I can walk it.
Yeah.
Whether I need to trip and stumble along the way, I would rather not, but I'm not going to grow if I don't.
Yeah.
So if I know that I'm being guided into a mess, I will be guided out of the mess one way or another.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And it's always, and for some people, like with the channel of the 1333, it's imperative for them to actually do that. They can only know in hindsight in order to bring forth that wisdom. So part of their process is all about having to teach from hindsight, like, and then we can look at that on a profile level as well, with the 6 and the 3 line bumping into things, literally having a shit show in order to be able to learn and teach from that wisdom. But I wanted to mention something that you raised a second ago, and if I can remember, I don't think I can. I think it's gone. It was really interesting. No, it's gone. Yeah, no, I've lost it. Oh well.
Okay.
So yeah, the other thing you can do as well, there's like 22 different psychic abilities. Oh, I remember now. Got it. So when you were saying that there's not everything that we can do, so like left brain, so you know in like variables where you have the left brain and the right brain, so I have an open head and I'm meant to be able to I can open and connect with the cosmos in a quite an easy way, and I can get very still in my mind, but I have a left brain as well, so it's also about awareness. It's always about being busy and thinking. So how information comes through us, or how we channel information, doesn't have to be what people say. Like there's many roads to Rome, which is, you could be channeling and writing information and just like writing and it's all coming through, or it could be meditation and your mind does slow down. And my mind actually slowed down a lot having been through this whole process, whereas before it was completely like
Right.
monkey mind. But I only managed to get into this space by being very, very grounded, very, very slow in my body, and at peace with things, like not overstimulated. Anyway, let's look at fear. How do we know when it's a fear response versus an intuitive response or an instinctual response? Let me pose this question. Is there a difference between instinct and intuition?
Yes and no. Again, I think it goes back to how we're defining it in the context. So I think in its purest, most primal form, instinct is your intuitive guidance to navigate in a way that will preserve your life in its most primal form.
And even sex, like arousal, that's an instinct.
Right. Right. And that's for the procreation of life. But our early forms, cave people needed perhaps some instinct to know where to hunt, where to find their food, those kinds of things. From a fear standpoint, they needed that to kick in to keep them safe. Sometimes perhaps they just felt fear because there was a predator in the area that they may not have seen. That doesn't mean that it was any less valuable as guidance to them. If they left the area and never encountered it, they may never know what they avoided, perhaps. So you and I talked about this a little bit previously. This is one of the areas that I help my clients delve into for themselves. I'm talking about the kind of fear that is programmed in that is actually holding them back and keeping them from fulfilling their potential. That's part of their limiting programming and conditioning. There could be a genuine feeling of fear around something that they are meant to avoid, but that's not all that common these days with the types of decisions we're talking about. And that doesn't mean you might not feel fear about going to a conference that is meant to be heated because maybe there's going to be a terrible tragedy or accident that spirit's trying to keep you out of, or something like that. I'm just trying to acknowledge all potential scenarios. But sometimes the fear that we experience is actually, we interpret it as fear. Butterflies in our stomach is, before giving a speech or speaking publicly, is really potentially energy from spirit to be able to carry out that activity. But it comes through and it feels like an anxiety because that energy is looking for a place to go and doesn't have a place to go, So for me, the biggest key is to be aware of what you're feeling and aware of the story that's playing in your head. So yes, you need to be connected to your body and be able to be grounded in it and be present to what you're experiencing and what you're sensing. And then also be aware of what is going on in your head the best that you can. And that's where the key lies. And I think people, if you don't slow down enough, you have the potential to miss either or both of those things. And you yourself, Jess, you mentioned about slowing down and is really what was at the core of what propelled you forward in your ability to listen to your guidance.
Yeah.
We're in too much of a rush. There's a lot of hype, a lot of pressure to do, a lot of pressure to perform, succeed, accomplish, and all of that in general in the world. And this really takes being able to be still so that you can notice, it's like a very still lake that has a mirror like finish on it. A leaf drops in it, and you're going to notice the ripple from that a lot easier than when it's a real windy day and there's a lot of waves. It's not going to make a difference. You're not going to notice it.
Yeah.
And sometimes our cues are that subtle. So if we can drop in, let go of the story, let go of the fear, and just be in source, be in that place of stillness, of no thingness, where nothing has coalesced yet. There are no thoughts, there are no feelings, there is nothing. And connect and ask to know what we need to know. And very often in my work, the subconscious works in pictures very often. So we can work with images that are presenting or sensations in the body. Can you describe it for me? Does it have eyes? Is it a person? Is it a color? Is it, and then get a sense of what does it need to do to show you what you need to know? And that's where my gift comes in guiding someone through that self-discovery.
And I think you're coming back to a really important point as well about being able to get still enough and present. Key is presence. Like, how present are we throughout the day? And that's what changed my life. It was developing a lifestyle where I was present, awake. I have the phrase conscious, awake, and aware. And when all of the nervous system practitioners here, it's when you can get into the body and start to really tune into where there is tension, where there's stored energy, and move. And one of the things that I teach people a lot is to move energy through the body. So to bring in cosmic energy, to bring up energy from the earth and allow it to flow through down your grounding, up around your system. And because energy needs to move, and what's actually happening in the body, where it's the tension or the emotion or even the illness, it's where the energy's just been blocked and just not been able to move for too long.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, I start with something similar as well to help people begin to relax and then actually move energy through and clear out some of the noise. And it's progressive work. It's, you don't have to come in already knowing how to do this. If you did, you wouldn't need my help. But yeah, it's connecting and seeing what moves and what doesn't move, because there's a lot of noise that we don't need, that's not serving us. And I would imagine you find, as I do as well, there are times when my head's just noisier. If I've got something big going during the day that I'm worried about getting done, I'm still human, might not be a good time for me to try to quiet my mind and meditate, depending on the day. And then there's other days where it doesn't bother me to meditate before I get up and I can do it. And sometimes at night, it's the same thing. It's definitely a process, and it helps to have someone with you who can hold the energy in this space and help you, tune in and get comfortable with what works for you to get quiet. And to sometimes I'm able to compartmentalize the noisy part of the mind and realize that there is a part of me that is engaged in the process, that is engaged in that quiet space, that is connecting with stillness. And the other part that needs to know the flavor of the day is off over there exploring it. And maybe many people can do that, maybe not.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of my split definition as well. So there's a part of me that's settled in the experience, and then there's a part of me that's over here having its own conference.
Interesting. And I wonder if that gets, when you're with somebody else, whether that then bridges it and stops it. So that's really wholeness. It's about wholeness. Into that sense of wholeness.
Exactly.
I now want to talk about fear again, or develop this idea about fear. So I'll talk from personal experience about a couple of times throughout my journey of evolution. So Costa Rica, June 2019, I'm getting the insight that you need to get rid of all your possessions. You need to throw everything away. You're not getting the plane in 2 days. You've got no cash. Don't worry. You've got nowhere to, you don't know what's going to happen, but trust us. Take this action. And I knew I had to do it. Like, I had to give away my government housing, and because it was so strong, this knowing that that was the choice that I needed to make at this point. But there were moments when fear overcame. So what did I do? Because I actually, like, a lot of this is documented because it was quite interesting. But I was like, I just started doing breath work. I would let tears flow and I would do breath work. And as I did the breath work, I got clarity, and it released, again, it's about moving the energy. And so I just made some notes about some of the gates in the spleen area, the splenic gates. So spleen gate 48 is about trusting that you'll know what you need to know when you need to know it. And the challenge with this is about not letting fear of not knowing stop you. Having a sense of being inadequate and being paralyzed by not being able to move forward because of this overwhelming fear. So when you start to have awareness of the challenge of that gate and the way the low expression can play out, you start to say, okay, here are the tools that I can use to move through this so I can come to my own clarity. Because if we don't move, if I had got on that plane back, my life would be crap. Like, it would have been so bad to have gone back to England at that time. I would never have, my whole life is just so amazing now. So if I had let that fear hold me back, and gone against my intuitive knowing, probably something else would have come up to have blocked it anyway, to be honest. But this is also about trusting your connection to source. So the more that you can trust the guidance you're receiving and have that inner, that deep inner sense of your personal conviction or knowing, the easier it is to actually just walk through life and on the beat of your own drum. So then we've got gate 44, where it's about getting stuck in past patterns and being able to express your authentic self without compromise. The low expression of this gate is fear and paralysis, created from the belief that the patterns from the past are insurmountable. So that is the story. Like, that will be the story going around, like, oh no, I can't do this, I can't do that, blah, 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 blah. So again, it's like, find tools that will enable you recognize when these are fears coming up that are not true, so that you can push through them to get to the other side. Because these aren't fears about like survival. These are actually fears that are just existential. They're not real. So the 57 is to trust. The highest expression of this gate is to be able to trust your own instincts and to be able to tell the difference between your instinctive response and fear of the future. So I'll give you an example of how this showed up in real life. When I first came to human design to teach it, I knew I was meant to teach it, but I was like, I could not face 7 years of training and the vast body of work. I was like, I've already mastered the system. Why am I being guided now to let go of everything there to start on this? Now I realize it was all meant to be, and I'm back deep in my teaching, which is the thing I've actually spent my whole life mastering: pedagogy, how we learn, critical, curriculum design, organizing, sequencing, delivering information, making complex ideas really simple. But human design is part of it. But I was being held back. So the key with that gate 57 is knowing what you need to know and taking the action to prepare to take the action and allow everything to work out on its own. So the low expression of it is knowing that what you need to do and then not doing it. So I actually lost a year because I knew I was meant to learn human design and I could not face. And actually, I've been able to absorb and grasp the information very intuitively and very quickly once I surrendered to it. So that was a fear that was holding me back when I was going against what I intuitively knew. 28, struggle. So the gate of struggle. And the low expression is causing you to think that you failed and to be stuck in victimhood. I'm a failure and blah, blah, blah. get out of that, get your limiting beliefs out of the way, and reframe struggle. Actually, I had this with someone the other day. I said, see life as an adventure, see struggle as opportunity, challenge as opportunity for evolution. And as soon as you start to shift that and reframe it, you get to experience the high expression. So again, I just want to talk about, this is like energies, this is a real way of embodying the energies and gates in the chart to move them so that you can use them on the highest potential and get into your highest level. What I want to say as well about gate 28 is how it's worked for me. It's active in my chart, and it was why I was able to make those big giant leaps. Being able to walk out of a school and all of my security and my having a job, but not knowing what was going to happen. And then 3 days later, getting paid £15,000 in cash, being flown over to Turkey to have the best like tuition work ever, having private drivers, like 5-star hotels, because I took the decision to leave something where there was no certainty. So that's the high expression of the gate. You make a rash decision that seems crazy and risky to other people. Again, did it in Costa Rica, giving away everything, but that's the high energy of that gate. So that's really powerful. Knowing when to take risks, and also helping other people to navigate which risks are valuable for them to take. And finally, the gate 32, which is Destiny's got this gate, she's in our group. It's to trust in divine timing and to be ready. So when we're in a low expression of that, we're forcing, we're pushing hard, the ego's in control. So what would we do? You want to just surrender it, just let it go. And this is why as well, like in terms of business and marketing, I stopped being, at first, when I was first starting in my journey, I was like, oh yeah, 100K months. Oh yeah, this person's doing this. Oh, she knows that. And eventually I just stopped needing any external knowledge. I just knew intuitively if that was something I needed to learn, or if this, so now I literally feel so comfortable in my own flow. I don't worry. That's how I've come to that position.
Right.
I just know when to
Beautiful.
I just know when to take an action, when to wait. I take the divine inspiration, I allow it, so it's like little things. Like someone sent me, in fact, I'll read it out. And also to see if there's anybody in our questions. So Denise, who will do a chat with us at some point, sent me this. By acting beforehand, my virtual influences create future realities. So like I'll set up a group, or I'll create a curriculum, and it will then come true. Like I was telling you at the start, like, right. Oh, I need to go and study this thing. A few hours later, somebody rings me and asks for a session on it. Everything I want already exists. So it's like this deep knowing and playfulness with the quantum field. My thoughts of power produce power. So this is where we start having the mastery of the thoughts. And through that, we're able to change our external reality and our physiology, which then drives our decision making. So that's where we start moving into being the empowered creator, using these energies. Every day, reality melds together the real with the imagined as I act out fictions that produce the fact. My experiences are the reflections of projections I alone cast forth in my daily activity. And I always say, spiritual practice is action. So that aligned action is spiritual practice, but if you're in fear and you're holding yourself back and you're not taking the action and you're not following your cues, that's when you're living in limitation, scarcity, and just horribleness.
It's a beautiful, beautiful example that you've shared. Thank you for sharing that. And it's interesting, thinking about the spleen and the fears do have different qualities to them and different purposes. And I guess that part of the way that I've learned it is the spleen is about what is healthy for us and what isn't, whether it's on a more of a spiritual level or it's on a more mundane, literal survival level, ultimately, if it's not healthy for us, it is about our survival.
Mm.
So how immediately are is the threat something that we need to pay attention to, or is it more of a bigger quality of life issue that's ultimately going to affect our health?
Sorry,
Yeah, I
no, go
go
on.
ahead.
No, carry on.
I guess my biggest example of that is the story that I've shared in many times, many ways, where I was in, the corporate world and not feeling at ease and not having the courage to leave, not knowing what to do differently or what to do about it, but feeling my future there was just limited. And what ultimately happened is that I had to drive, like 4 hours on my birthday
Mm.
to the corporate office with all the other people in my department to be told what our fate would be, because we all worked for a program that was under contract and the contract was not renewed. So were we going to be absorbed elsewhere or move on? And I knew then that I was moving on. And it was interesting to watch everyone else sharing contact information and recruiter information and, ideas. And I just sat there and was like, this is not me any longer.
Yeah.
And that was, 25 years ago or so. And to be able to walk through that before I knew any of this about myself and just trust. I'm still working on that self-trust. It's
Yeah.
a work in progress. And I did a little of what you talked about, where I didn't know how to be in business and I thought there was something special you needed to know in order to succeed, and went on the quest looking for it. None of what I learned worked for me. And
Yeah.
now I'm back to trusting me in a phase where a lot is yet falling into place. So it'll be interesting for me to see how things go forward for me here, and see what comes. I love that, as long as I don't focus on the fear.
Yeah.
It's like, thank you for that. Yeah, got it. I'm okay.
Yes.
You know,
And the other thing was, yeah, when I was having those little bouts, like there were moments where there'd be fear, like I'd be like, what am I doing? I've got no possessions now. I've got no
Mhm.
clothes. I don't know what's going on. And then it was literally like it was initiation. So take it as like, let me ground and center. And when I'm centered and you're in the body, you can tune into the high, you can get the higher, you'll get
Mhm.
get the clearness to allow that voice of your soul or your higher self, the wise guidance that. And now it just comes through very clearly for me. Like I'll just be washing up
Yeah.
and it'll be like da da da, or if I have just whatever, it's really clear. So really I think it's about your, the best thing that you can do is to really trust and build that connection with your own higher self, like really
Exactly.
trust
Exactly.
that. So there
Mine
are,
isn't quite as present for me, and what I would call verbal as yours is. It's a little slower, a little more vague. Um, so it's awesome when it comes through clearly and succinctly. For me, it still takes a bit of investigation, and I put that out there for everybody who's, it may never develop more clearly for me. That may not be my path. It may be the phase that I'm in right now
yeah,
on growing into something different. So
yeah,
just be patient with yourself, embrace and love what you have right now. Be as present for yourself as you can be, to be the highest expression of yourself that you can be. Love yourself and forgive yourself.
yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
this was HD Chats episode 2, with Kelly and myself, Jess. And if you are watching on a replay, just put hashtag replay. If you are looking for craniosacral therapy or in a light soul connection coaching, Kelly's your woman. If you're looking for projector embodiment or learning how to write content that converts and how to clarify your message, I'm your girl. So just
Yeah.
reach out via DM. I think Kelly's got, we'll put the information on YouTube to how to find us. So, or get HD reading as well. Hello. Are you, I don't know if
There
you,
you go.
yeah. So,
I do basic HD readings as well.
yeah. And
Yeah.
questions, like we would love you to
We
pose
love
questions and have join the conversation and carry it on, and inquire, you know, have curiosity and inquiry and expansion, because it's only through this, through talking and sharing experience, we are able to develop deeper levels of understanding of each other and see things in ways that we didn't see them. And yeah, that's the joy of life, right?
Yay. Yay.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'm gonna just stop the recording.
Okay.
Thank you so much for
Bye for
watching.
now.
Bye. Not end the meeting. Hang on. Cancel. More. Stop the live stream. And stop the recording. Hold on.